Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to Retro Reviews. We've made it with our weekly Rocky reviews. We are finally here at Rocky 4. Without going in too in-depth, it's easily our favourite Rocky film out of all of them, but it's one that we're really looking forward to talking about. I think people week to week as well have been looking forward to this one. If you're a Rocky fan, you know how it is. You know, Rocky 1, objectively the best, but the one you really want to talk about is Rocky 4. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. As always, completely spoiler-filled. This is going to function much like a discussion. And Retro Reviews, if you are new to it, if you just tuned in tonight, Retro Reviews is basically a series that we do on the channel, a fairly new series that we've done, where it's given us this chance to go back to talk about these big franchises, these franchises that we've maybe mentioned in passing that we love. We've just never got around to it. And a lot of these older films, it doesn't have to be a franchise, just older films in general. And the fact that there's nothing out at the cinema. So it's nice to go back to some of these bigger films. But we're going to get completely into Rocky 4 in just a second. But first, over to George with the socials.
Absolutely, guys. So, as usual, the best way to find out what we're going to be doing is by finding us on our social media accounts. So, we've got Facebook Cinema Savvy and we've got Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. We're starting to boost up how we're posting on socials. You might have seen a couple of posts from me and Chris yesterday. So, be sure to check it out because there are going to be more posts, that are going to be more interactive. So, do keep them coming. And as usual, the best way to help us on our live streams is to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We've got some goals we're trying to get to before the end of the year. Brackets, I'm not sure it's going to happen. But either way, we have had a fun year from what we can have of a year with no cinema releases, bar one called Tenet. And that is, again, as Chris said, why we're here, why we're talking these retro reviews. And Ajit, this is the one tonight. If you've not seen any of our other Rocky reviews, check them out. We've got a playlist on our franchise section. It's the Rocky reviews. We've done 1, 2, 3, and tonight's 4. Next week, we'll have Rocky 5. The week after, Rocky Balboa. And then we're switching to something else, but there could be an update in regards to Creed. So we'll keep you guys updated when we know what we want to do. But as usual, do comment along because we have loved these Rocky streams of people. We've had a lot of people each week commenting different stuff, spitting some facts at us, just discussing the films and what they're made of it. And I think it's fair to say when you think of Rocky 4, straight away it is the most popular one. It is the highest grossing one at a box office. Mm-hmm. Rocky 4 is the one that most people can tell you the most about, alongside the first one. Definitely 1 and 4 are probably the best and most popular. I think it's a fair way of saying it.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about the way that you have to sort of divide, similar to Star Wars. We talked about this last week. You have to divide objectively the best from your favorite. And I think that's exactly the same case with this franchise here. We've already had one comment already from Daniel with Happy Birthday, Polly. We will be talking about the robot much, much later on. We have a plan. We're going to be talking about it. I like to think that I sort of like, in hindsight, intentionally planned to have the full beard ready for this review today to emulate Stallone in the Arctic tundra of Russia. That's not the case. But with all that being said, let's just dive into it. So as you just said, we're getting a few more people come in now. Comment along as we go through and we'll get the discussion going. So we always start with first time seeing this one. It again, broken record, it would have just been a series of things, but this one was the one where, because being a lifelong 80s movie fan, you can't get more 80s than this film. This is, if you're going to have a Mount Rushmore of 80s movies, this better be up there. If aliens landed and said, tell me what the 80s is all about, you just throw them a copy of Rocky 4 and you say, crack on. So this one absolutely stayed with me. The soundtrack, I was probably already listening to the soundtrack before I'd even seen the film. There are some great songs in this film. Burning Heart, Survivor again, No Easy Way Out, all the montage songs, Hearts on Fire. I was listening to that stuff way before I'd even seen the film. So then when you get to the film and you hear that music in there, it's just great. And I've said to you beforehand, and I'll probably bring it up when we get onto tone in a second of this film, the whole thing just feels different. It's a lot sillier. It's dare I say, cartoony. It's sort of doubling down on what we talked about last time with Rocky 3. It's absolute insanity. It's madness. It feels like it's even edited. With the amount of montages in there, it feels like you're watching like an MTV music video. So this one stayed with me with everything, like the moments, like we'll talk about it later, but living in America, just the cartoon bad guy and, the good American hero is going to beat the evil Russian. I can see why this probably made the most amount of money. I think it's definitely sort of like the most commercial of all the Rocky films. But no, I just, even like going back to it when I first watched it, it stayed with me. I had a blast with it. And this is a film I've watched countless times. It was nice going back to it though for this, but I already knew kind of knew Rocky 4 like the back of my hand before this anyway, because I've seen it that many times.
Yeah, this is fun because this is the one probably after Rocky 1 I've seen the most. And it's that when the cinemas were open, I remember telling like, oh, I think I'm going to do Rocky 1 and Rocky 4. It's a Friday and a Monday. And I was like, but I just can't not do 2 and 3 between it. So I never got around to watching Rocky 4, which would have been insane at a cinema. It's exactly what you said. It's the epitome of the 80s cinema, 80s action stars as well. You've got all that stuff happening. You've got Dolph Lundgren emerging. You've got Stallone in his prime. We've still got Apollo Creed hanging around for one more film. And it's everything you kind of want from it. Now, going back to my first time viewing, again, I'm broken record because both said I couldn't tell it to you. All I can just remember is that insane montage in the snow. And I was like, this is insane. I remember watching like a Sunday morning. And of course, I think this was around about the time I'd probably seen, I think it might have been, I can't remember. I think this might have been near The Expendables 2. Definitely after Expendables 1. It's like, oh my God, look, it's young Dolph Lundgren. Absolute animal. We'll get to him later on. But Rocky 4 is that one where you can revisit it. It's an hour and a half. It's got a great length. Everything happens so quick. And it's, as you said, it's one giant music video. The editing is surreal. Is probably a better way of putting that one. But it's like Fast and Furious. We said this before we hit live. When you get to these films, it's, you have Rocky 1, and Rocky 1 is that drama. You'll not think, if you watch Rocky 4, that the first one in this franchise was nominated for Best Film at the Oscars. Sorry, that won Best Film at the Oscars. Better way of saying that. And it's insane to see how they're given. And the only comparison is Fast and Furious. And my word, what a way to do it. If you're going to hit your peak, this is the mid-80s. This is the Cold War. This is, the USSR versus the USA. It's the ultimate fight for power. And then Rocky doesn't just win over a fight. He also wins over the Russian public, and he finishes the film with the speech. And I completely forgot about the speech, but we'll get to it. But the most amazing for this with me this time was this is the first time I've seen Rocky 4 since I saw Creed 2. Maybe even since Creed 1. So I had a really cool experience thinking of what follows down the line. Granted, it was 30 years later. There's some really cool stuff there, which we'll obviously get into in a bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we had another comment from Elizabeth as well saying this was the first film she remembers going to see at the cinema. If COVID hadn't have hit, if it hadn't have struck back, I would be seeing this film in the cinema too. It would be incredible. Hopefully for the 35th anniversary, we get it in cinemas. I'd quite like to see the original version though. We'll talk about the director's cut at the end of our review. But yeah, no, absolutely. And you mentioned there the amount of montages in there and that it's a good length at 90 minutes. The amount of montages in there, there's one that's a driving montage, which is fantastic, but it's just a clip show. It's a highlight reel of the previous Rocky films, which just feels like it's there padding for time. So if you take that away, the film's probably closer to about 80 minutes or something like that. So it definitely objectively should probably be the shortest Rocky film, but be interesting to see the director's cut if there is a lot of new footage out there that we haven't seen. So I mean, we've talked about like comparing it to other films in the series of this franchise. You really can't. It's an entity unto itself. It really is a completely different animal. Like even just like the character of Rocky, like physically, this got like Jesus Christ. Just everyone in this film, him and Drago just going up against each other. It was definitely hitting something. I won't say they're definitely natural in this film, which is kind of funny because you have like this sort of they're champion in America, like it's USA kind of thing. Like he's the natural, he's going to go and train in the cabin and lift winches and pulleys and go running and chop logs in the snow. And then you've got the evil Russian guy over here who's injecting himself and he's unnatural and everything like that. I'm like, they were both clearly on it when you see Rocky in this film. It's absolutely mental. So Rocky himself, I'd say it's quite light on character watching this one again, especially for Rocky, certainly compared to all the other ones. Say what you want about Rocky 3, and yeah, that was definitely cartoony as well, but it was still punctuated with scenes like the death of Mick and some nice heart-to-heart moments with Adrian, and there's a few in here. There's sort of like one notable one. Yeah. But other than that, you're literally there this time to just watch action star Sylvester Stallone beat up Dolph Lundgren. That's it. There's not really much to his character in this one, and it does follow a similar structure to Rocky 3 in that there's an inciting incident, a death of a beloved character that inspires him to want to get his own back. But it's kind of a flip on 3 because 3 he kind of goes into depression and he just completely falls off the wagon. and then Apollo Creed has to come in, step up, and get him to where he beats the evil bad guy at the end. This one, there is no moment like that. There is no sort of downtime. There's very kind of little mourning of Apollo Creed's death. And you mentioned last week where you had a sort of an emotional disconnect from Mick's death in that film. And I mentioned that I kind of have the same effect with Apollo Creed in this one. It's still really sad to see him go because he is such a pivotal character. And I think that the Creed films have done a really good job of going back and sort of mining what they can from this film and making it into something more dramatic in light of like the first Rocky film or Balboa, and keeping it more in that consistent tone. But after he dies, it's just sort of like, move on, training montages, let's go beat the bad guys. So there isn't really that downtime. The film never breathes. And I think because of that, that's why it feels maybe light on character for Rocky in this one.
Yeah, and this is one of the things I didn't expect. So with Apollo Creed death is that famous thing, and you mentioned that one good emotional scene. Because you are right, Stallone doesn't have much to do. It's exactly, this is the 80s movie star Stallone. It's not really Rocky anymore. Granted, he is Rocky, but it's that the story's gone, the development's gone, and you get to the death, and the only sort of, to me, passing comment about Apollo Creed after the funeral is his trainer, which is actually, I thought, a really, really great scene until he ends it with, and now I see you as my son. Which just, don't get me wrong, I'm not here to nitpick because I had a blast watching this, but it's just kind of like, you trained him for one fight, man, and you're just here in Russia with him. Like you could tell it was written and directed by Stallone. I think that's the far nicer thing, because it was this great scene with great dialogue, and then it's just like, now I see it in you. It's like, oh, okay. Anyway, Apollo Creed's death. For some reason, I just not forgotten about the death. Obviously, it's coming. It's that big build up, but it was that moment of, even the delivery of if he dies felt different. I don't know in meme culture and GIF culture if they've changed in my mindset of maybe how long I thought they were going to go on for. But yeah, it just kind of like his death happened. It's like now Rocky's going to Russia, and suddenly it's like Rocky won't fight, and then he is fighting, and then he's not, and he is. And the newspaper montage, granted it's sort of 20 years before, but at least the Harry Potter films can do that properly. I think there could have been some really actually good scenes in there if we'd have had more about the aftermath of his death to build up for the rematch, because it's just kind of like they won't fight, but they are going to fight, and now it's all signed and sealed and delivered. So I wish, as an outright, we'd have had a lot more time in between Rocky going to Russia and coping with the death, because that's the beauty of Creed. Creed was able to go into that in the Creed films so well, about how Stallone felt with the character and what that meant to him. So it's weird because in hindsight, in the future, we know that is addressed to a point, whereas we don't really get it addressed in this, which is really strange, because normally it's been tied with the deaths and how they've coped. And it did feel the same. I didn't feel anything when Apollo Creed died. Maybe because he's got that. Maybe it's because he's as famous for dying as he is for being the Rocky villain. Would people care about Apollo Creed as much had it not been for Rocky 4? I don't think so. And it's nothing wrong with that. I love Carl Weathers, but it's the America stuff that makes it. We had a teaser in the first one. This one has the song, has everything, and you're buzzing, you're in the mood. If you're American, they'd be well patriotic at this point in time. But yeah, in terms of sort of development, characters, you're not there. But if you're not invested by Rocky 4, because I will say, not to really defend it as such, but there's not room for his character to develop when you reach this point. And maybe that's me sounding naive and not expecting much, but when we go back to Rocky 2, and my biggest criticism of it was that they had an entire life arc in the first hour where it was they got engaged, they got married, he spent all his money, and she was pregnant. That's like 4 films worth.
Yeah.
And I think going back to Rocky 3 was great because you had the mixed death, you had the dealing with his first loss, but Rocky 4, there's not much left for him to accomplish, and maybe that's why, because we've had it all happen in the previous film. So I don't mind it because you know what you're in for, you know what you get in Rocky 4. I think Stallone does that in a way. Obviously, been mid-80s and you've been waiting years for it to come out. Who knows what people's thoughts would have been, but I can't fault it. It's like the Star Wars prequels, isn't it? Like, there is just too much fun to be had.
The acceptance, yeah.
And because, it is great, and it's the history dynamic and everything. I just had an absolute blast going through it. I'm sorry if I'm waffling at this point. But once again, the characters that make this. And I said to you before it live that we got a lot more Paulie. We didn't get too much of him in the second and third film, and we got a couple of great scenes again with him. Nothing like the first one. Again, very different, but at least he's back in the limelight to a point. We got more Paulie than Adrian, which is not what I thought.
Yeah, it's weird. Like Adrian's always a great character. Like she's played brilliantly. And like there's the one scene you do understand her concern in this as well because it's following straight after Apollo Creed's death, and she's saying, you know, this is different. Like you can't win against this guy. And you know, like from her perspective, she would be concerned. She would be terrified that the same thing's going to happen to her husband. So it's a nice scene. Yeah, we don't really get much of her, and to be honest, I don't really know what else she could have done in this film. She's there to support when she needs to be. She's there, but we don't really get much of that relationship side. We just get like the sort of like the cake scene, don't we? The anniversary cake at the beginning of the film, and that's it.
A lovely cake, I must add.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
considering Paulie just got like a slab and candles, and then like Stallone's like secretly had this incredible one made. Fair play.
And Paulie, like he has some by this film, I'd say. Probably from the last one as well a little bit, but definitely by this one, he has cemented himself as the comic relief character, and I'm fine with that. Like he's fallen into that. There was more layers to him, I guess, in like the first couple of Rocky films, but he always still had that comedic edge to him. But they've just like, I mean, this is the whole film, just doubling down on everything, and they did exactly that with the humor, mostly surrounding the robot. The robot and Paulie are almost like a double act for the first half of this film. I did actually I know we were going to talk about the robot later, but I'm talking about the robot now. I may as well talk about it. I wanted to know the origin of this robot. Where the hell did this robot come from? Like, why was it a thing? How did it get implemented into the film in the Rocky franchise, which for the most part, till this point, apart from Thunder Lips, had been mostly grounded. So apparently it was an actual robot, and I think it was made for Stallone's son, who suffered with autism, and I think it was like to help him. And then because of that, Stallone wanted to put it in the film. The robot also has a name, which I found out earlier when I was doing the Twitter posts. It's called Sicko, S-I-C-O. I'm assuming that's how you say it. So now I've become even more attached to this robot because it's got a name and everything. It's weird, but it's going back to the prequel thing. It's like, well, of course it's weird. I want the weirdness. I want the completely over the top stuff. Like there's a robot that's not out of the ordinary. There is one of my favorite scenes, which I'll talk about later with one of my favorite scenes, which surrounds the robot. But Paulie's great. There's just loads of little cutaway things, not even like necessarily a line of dialogue. There's a moment where he's entering the ring between Apollo Creed and Dolph Lundgren. And he just takes like one of the props of like the sets. It's like this staff with like a voodoo kind of staff. He just like goes, I'm having that. And it's little things like that. When he goes to Russia and he's like stumbling about in the snow, he makes this noise. I can't even replicate the noise as he's like stumbling and like falling over. He's brilliant in this. They don't make him a complete buffoon. They probably do more than other Rocky films, but he's just always enjoyable. I've always loved Paulie all the way through it.
Yeah, this is the thing, like because he is the comic relief, but it's not comedy that's just too slapstick. I think that's the key. Where he's the kind of joke.
Sorry, the Chipmunk song. Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's the robots though. There are two, right? Because that's the woman. I didn't know if it had different eyes. It looked like the giant ant from Mandalorian.
Yeah, it's like Black Manta, isn't it, from Aquaman? Like these huge eyes, like these alien eyes. I think it's the same robot, but I think Paulie somehow calibrated it to speak. So it's like, hey, Paulie, who taught it to talk like that? Like, I guess like Paulie's also like a technical whiz, if that's the case. Then, and he's sort of like got into it, and yeah, it's weird.
It's just everything's exceptional about it. I didn't know this was about Stallone with his son, so that's pretty cool because again, it's that the dynamic I've noticed is that Rocky is Stallone. What I said to you, how his character is in Rocky 1 to then how he acts in Rocky 2 and Rocky 3 onwards, it is basically a reflection of Stallone's career at this point in real life. So bringing in the robot's a pretty cool thing. I did quite like that. We'll get to that anniversary thing later on, but there could be some very strange decisions if it doesn't come back. But also, I don't know how you can cut around it. That being said, yeah, Paulie stuff's great. I do love him, but I think obviously his best scenes are those one-liners. The one I noticed was on the montage when Stallone's like pretending to be the horse in the snow and he's like pulling the carriage. This is the first time I've ever caught on it's Paulie sat on it. It's not like an empty carriage or like a group of people. It's just Paulie sat there, and not I'm saying there'd be slapstick, but if it was like he pulls an empty carriage and he's like, Paulie, sit on it, do it as well. Be funny, but it'd just be like it's a bit too easy, a bit too cheesy. So I know the fact it's really subtle that Paulie's just sat on there and Stone's pulling him. Just
Mm.
everything was great to his like little speech before they get into the ring at the end when he's like on the verge of tears, and then he gets in the ring. He sees Lundgren. He's like, you know what? I don't want to be you anymore. And it's Rocky 3 as well. Like he just has these great one-liners in the corner of the ring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love it. There's probably more I can think of by the end of it. I will say, like we always talk about, sorry, the relationship between Rocky and Adrian being one of the best. I want to see more of Paulie and the robot. There was genuine chemistry there. I wanted to see more of that. Maybe we're not going to get it in the director's cut. That absolutely breaks my heart. But yeah, no, just thinking about that. We'll talk about the director's cut at the end. But I'm trying to. It's going to be really tough to cut around that because so much of it is tied with the family and at home stuff. So. We'll see. I'm actually really upset that they never, in any future Rocky films, they never cut to the robot. There's never a scene where they, in Creed or something, I would have loved like a link back to the robot somehow. They go into like the basement or something in Rocky.
It's a waiter. It's a waiter at the restaurant. Does he have to pay his own staff?
There you go. He could be the doorman at the restaurant, or there's like a tarpaulin thrown over it, and Cree goes like, "What's under here?" And you just see a bit of it, and he's like, "Oh, that's from the '80s or something." That would have been great. But anyway, we'll talk more about the robot later. I want to talk about Apollo Creed though, because I think it kind of was like that. It was like the Mick thing where he'd served his purpose. There wasn't really anything more to do with his character, and we've got to get rid of him. His death does kind of feel like a plot device though, but I do kind of like the angle they go with it, where Apollo Creed's saying that he's long since retired and no one knows his name now. No one comes up for autographs, and he wants that limelight again. He wants to feel what it was like to be the world champion, where everyone knows your name, you're highly respected. He says that you get out of that ring and it's almost like your ancient history, and it's almost like they're both approaching that retirement age. Well, I mean, Rocky's been approaching retirement age since like the beginning of Rocky 2, yet here he still is. But I kind of liked that because I think Apollo Creed is that kind of character where he does still want to be on top, but I mean, we kind of saw this in Rocky 2 as well, where he couldn't just let it lie. Like he was getting the hate mail in, and he's always got to sort of like prove himself. So it is kind of that maybe he was going through a midlife crisis, just wanted to prove himself, one more shot at glory, which obviously backfires in the film. But I thought that was a believable continuation for Apollo Creed's character. I could see him being like that. I don't think he doesn't strike me as the kind of person that would just be the homebody. He'd always be the person who's got to sort of surround himself with the sport.
Yeah, and that's what I really liked from the sports side of things, that you make comments in Rocky 3, why am I on commentary? Even at the end, he wanted that rematch, which we get a repeat of at this beginning again. And it does come to that point where you think of these. Obviously, I'm not familiar with the boxing environment, but a lot of footballers, the main sport I follow, they all gone about like the day they now to retirement is the hardest day of their careers because it's like it's done. And it's that great scene with Apollo's like, I don't want to hear this from you, Stallion, and they had just have it out. And it's a great scene. And it's exactly if you take Apollo Creed in the first 2 films, he would continue that way. And he sees it as how do I take the limelight back? I do America versus Russia. It's the Cold War. Instead of Rocky fighting this guy, I'm going to fight him. And I think it's that build-up where now he knows he's back in the limelight. He's doing that press conference where he's calling the shots, making the comments, and it's him getting upset by it because they're just stating the facts, like, why are we fighting a has-been? And it felt so real. And it's all for that elaborate build-up to the fight. And the whole point of that fight, as you said, he is a plot point in this film. But what a way to build it up to. What a way to do it. To have the whole thing built up to that moment. It's in that first round when the first, like, the sort of the first couple of punches hit at the end, when it's like, okay, that is how you build up, this guy. He doesn't speak much and do anything. You just build him up the way, like his punch is thrown, like that, like he's just ready just to strike like a machine. And I think Carl Weathers was great in this from the scenes we had of him. It's just because we don't get anything after. Granted, again, Creed reflects that legacy, and once again, we'll get to it near the end when we get to sort of Rocky Balboa. All the respect in the world for Stallone for greenlighting that after he originally declined it, because I think that film has done a lot of good for the Rocky 4 arc, for how Stallone was, for how Creed was. The death so sudden, even like Rocky's hesitation at throwing the towel, because when I remember it in Creed, it felt like he was waiting an eternity to throw it in. He just had like a second or two hesitation, and that obviously cost him. I mean, he probably would have killed him still, even if he did throw the towel in. But it was that build up from the wife watching to everyone around it, the environment. It was just so well done. And I think that's what, when you get that Apollo Creed served his purpose. And as a character goes to be in the first 4 films, I thought he was really well done.
As it was a plot point, though, I always think that, was it really just easy killing the character? Did the character need to die? I think it would have actually had more of an impact maybe if... It does feel a bit artificial, like, oh, you know, the death of a beloved character and now we've got to go beat the bad guy because of it. If Apollo Creed hadn't have died, but say he'd been left like a complete vegetable after the fight, like he was in hospital, just gone, can't talk, like he wouldn't be able to walk again or anything like that. He's basically as good as, you know, I think that would, because then you could have had a scene where he goes to the hospital and he's just lying there and like Rocky's at his bedside and he's like, I've got to stop this guy. This is for me. Maybe that would have had more of it. I don't know. I don't like the fact that they killed Apollo Creed off. Maybe it seemed a little
extreme,
unnecessary, maybe. But again, with the hindsight of Creed, I love what they've done now. It kind of just reinforces that moment even more now. So with hindsight, I guess it does make sense for that movie. But we've got to talk about the opponent. We've got to talk about the big bad guy from this one. Dolph Lundgren as Ivan Drago. Jesus Christ, where do you start? So as someone mentioned earlier, if he dies, he dies. One of the few lines of dialogue that Lundgren has in this film, it's just the look, isn't it? It's just the personality, the persona, the stoic glance. The guy is like a robot. He is like a super Russian robot that he's having to fight, almost like a Terminator. He's so tall, just like physically imposing and everything. The one-liners that he does get are great. Do I prefer him to Clubber Lang? I don't know. The personalities are so different. One's like the fast-talking, charismatic one, the motor mouth, and then the other one's the guy who doesn't say anything. They couldn't be more different from each other. So I don't even know if I could pick a favorite, but he works as a villain, and I love the double act as well with Bridget Nielsen in it as well, as his wife. I don't. Does it say? Oh no, they do say that.
They do say it's like she's an Olympic gold medalist swimmer, and he's like the boxer, and it's great because I think with those as well, Henok actually put in the comments, but I'd seen it before, that because of how animated is probably the best way Clubber Lang and the Creed were, Dolph Lundgren wanted it needs to be different. And I think if you had this Russian guy that was just talking nonsense in the ring, it wouldn't work. Yeah. And it's going back to that point of killing Creed, that by killing Creed, Lundgren got credit, but like Drago got more, not respect, but it's that villainous, like what did he do to reach that villainous point? And it's the fact he killed him, and it's again the lines, he dies, and they're used so sparingly. And the one thing as well, the camera was always, they don't focus on really how big he is until you get in the ring. Granted, they say it a lot, he's massive, he's this and he's that. They don't sit there showing it off too much. Granted, we do get the training montages, but it's all about seeing him as like the specimen in the ring. Like I think of Captain America 1 when the lab experiment's over and like he awakened, but that's like him for the entire film. It's everything from the hair to the eyes to the stature. As I said, that like it's like a game, isn't it? Like when you charge up a punch just to do that, it's like a freeze frame of the end of a film. And again, what ways do you feel tension in the fights? Obviously, we know what's happening to Creed, but we also got that bit of tension with the Rocky, where, as usual, he does take a couple of punches to the face, but Lundgren just steals this. And it's hard because you can't see Creed as a villain because he befriended him, and the whole arc is the friendship after. It's right. What do you prefer, Clubber Lang or Drago? And I'm just like, well, I always prefer the animated people, the ones talking nonsense, winding them up. That's always great. But then you have to sit back and think, oh my God, just look at Lundgren in this. Because we know that Clubber Lang's this powerhouse that's got this bad rep and he's a dodgy fighter and he just wants to knock him out. But it's that he's the science experiment. And everything from, you'll mention that the punch per inch thing, the gyms for the montages for his training, like everything is designed so perfectly. And that's why I love it. I know we're jumping it in, but in the final fight, when the rounds go on, Drago just looks, he hasn't got the sort of eyes that the Rocky always has at the end of his fights, but it's everything from like his hair being flattened and down to the sweat to he's a completely different character. And that's what I love, is that kind of experiment thing where, you know, Clubber Lang's the same in round 15 as he was in round 1. We know he's going to lose, but he's essentially the same, whereas Drago just is completely 180 as a character and everything. It's just really, he's one of the greats. And again, jumping to Creed 2. Oh, we're going to have to Creed, aren't we?
Yeah. No.
His return.
When we both got to this one, I think we both realised that we kind of need to continue it, don't we? I'm glad you mentioned the training montage with him as well, because I mentioned this very briefly at the end of Rocky 3, and I wanted to make a point of talking about it in this one. So the shots that the people take in 3 and this one, the sound effects and everything, are shots that would kill a man, and literally do in this film. They make a point of saying, I can't remember what the average is for a boxer.
Is it 700? 700
something like
something?
That. Yeah. Pounds of pressure per square inch per punch. And they get Drago to test it out, and he gets 1,850 from a single punch. And I think actually when we get to like the second training montage, he even clocks in at over 2K, I think, in the film. Rocky takes all of these punches to the face, which is his usual standard. He usually tries to tire out the opponent. This one is all out war. Even on the soundtrack, the song that plays during the 15 rounds is called War. So it's completely ridiculous, but it's great. It just goes to the tone, doesn't it? Just everything bigger and better and more louder and more explosive and everything like that. And that was just purely what the 80s was. But I love Ivan Drago, and I like that. Talking about Creed again, they keep it on Rocky 4, Chris, keep it on Rocky 4, that they did manage to go more into that dramatic side of the character, and we got a lot more to the character, actually. He ceased to kind of be, we find out that this was just a face, this was like a persona. He basically was crafted in a lab by, the Russian premier. He was a political device, essentially. It's a very political film. We'll go up to I know you mentioned the Cold War stuff earlier, but we'll cycle back up to that comment at the very end. So we've talked about the montages. We have to go more into these montages, because this is my favorite Rocky soundtrack. Every song off it is amazing. It's actually the first Rocky film, not counting the Creed films, but in the main sort of 6-film Rocky series, it's the only one to not be composed by Bill Conti. This one was composed by Vince DiCola. I always wondered if there was some kind of falling out or something like that. It was just scheduling conflicts. He was working too hard on the first 2 Karate Kid films, and he didn't have time to work on Rocky 4. Vince DiCola, for me, I mean, he's composed a lot of stuff. His credits are very extensive, but the one thing that I remember him from, other than Rocky 4, is the Transformers the movie, and never forget that first the Transformers the movie from 1986. So was that a year apart?
Year after, back to back.
Very electronica, very, very synth heavy. I think he did like a lot of sort of, especially on Transformers, he did like a lot of improvised stuff, sort of like racing around the keyboards and everything like that. It's a very similar sound between the 2 films, especially Ivan Drago's theme, that sort of like low bassy synth hit. It's basically Unicron's theme from the Transformers film. It's almost identical. If you haven't listened to it, go and check it out on YouTube. It's basically the same song. I love the soundtrack. It's a shame, obviously, that Bill Conti couldn't come back. And although they don't rely on a lot of those earlier themes, you do get a couple of bars of Gonna Fly Now playing in the training montage. Not much, though. It feels perfect for this film. For what this film is, for the look, the style, how it's edited. It needed a soundtrack like that. And I don't think that more dramatic, somber... There's some like piano pieces in this over like the nice dramatic moments, although there aren't that many in this film. I think that soundtrack wouldn't have worked. And maybe that's just like my acceptance of Rocky 4 over the years, and it's just always been that. So that's how I've identified with it. But I can't imagine a different score going alongside this movie. I think it's perfect for what it needs to be. And then obviously like all the big hitters, as I mentioned earlier, like the driving montage, No Easy Way Out, fantastic. It's one of my favorite driving songs. Hearts on Fire, Survivor coming back after Eye of the Tiger, which plays at the beginning of this film as well. I forgot that it played again. I was like, fuck yes, I get more Eye of the Tiger at the beginning of the film. Burning Heart, great song, Hearts on Fire. There was actually a lot of music as well that was written or is like tentatively been written for this film. I know that there was rumors that Europe's The Final Countdown was going to be used in this film, and I think that was released on like a future soundtrack, like a special edition soundtrack of Rocky 4. But the big one, which we'll probably announce that. But Karate Kid 2, there's a song by Peter Cetera called The Glory of Love, was originally written for this film and was passed up by something else, or it was shelved, and then was later used in Karate Kid Part 2. So a lot of music that was on the cutting room floor. Sweetest Victory as well was a great song that was on the special edition soundtrack, which wasn't in this film. It's just great. It's always on my go-to. I don't think a week goes by, to be honest, where I'm not listening to one of the songs from this film. It's amazing. And the montages just speak for themselves as well.
I'm not gonna moan on that because I'm not familiar with most of these songs, so I didn't want to kind of interject saying that until you'd finished. As far as montages go and how it fits the film being the key thing, it works. You can't play Gonna Fly Now in this film, I'm sorry. As great as that soundtrack is, you can't play those classic Rocky soundtracks. I was listening to the Rocky 1 soundtrack a few weeks ago at work, and even from the singing in the street, nothing in that sounds like it works. Even when you get to the final ending, when Rocky wins, he has the bell theme. Even that doesn't work as well as it normally does, and obviously the film ends very differently because he gives his speech after, but the music-wise is great for this. I'm going to bring up a comment by Elizabeth as well. In the documentary, so I said they wanted rock music in the first Rocky. She's glad they didn't. Absolutely. The first Rocky film is perfect what it needed to be. I think if they'd have put rock music in there, I just don't really think it would have worked at all. Everything was perfect about that first film, and Rocky wasn't at a level where you can get away with that. This one, you do get away with that, and every soundtrack, every song choice fits the scenes, and they're not crammed in there for the sake of being crammed in there. They each accommodate their montages. Just to maybe you can say about the montages, but the songs they picked work for that. And my dad caught the last couple of minutes. I felt a bit bad for him because I've been off work, so I watched it like daytime, and he's like, "Oh, you're watching Rocky 4?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh yeah, this is the one." He was like this, like him and my mum weren't married at the time, so they were dating when this came. I was like, "Yeah, I remember taking him on to watch the film." I was like, "Yeah." So I also remember having the soundtrack on cassette, and I felt a bit bad. I was like, should I have waited till like 6 o'clock and asked if he wanted to watch it? She didn't want to watch it, but it was just that whole like Rocky thing again, where like he's got this soft spot for them, and they're just fun to go back to. And the music in this is great because I think when I went for their vinyls a couple of years ago, I remember saying like, "Why the hell is there a Rocky album here?" Not that I was complaining, but you know, when something just sticks out because it's not what you could have ever imagined. But that's probably just him in his the member berries sort of thing. But no, the music in this is great. I think I prefer the Rocky 3 one. I won't lie. The music in Rocky 3. Maybe that's because it's got a bit of soundtrack as well. But again, it suits what Rocky 4 needs to be. This is so different, and it's that what we said last week that you can't have Rocky 4 the way it is without Rocky 3 setting that up. By like losing Mick as a character, by entering that, we're in the crazy fun side of it all now rather than drama. And then Rocky 4 is like, yeah, this is the level we've reached and the level we're gonna. We can't even say stay at because obviously it changes very quickly in Balboa and Creed onwards. But this is that kind of peak of the Rocky Mountain of Madness, I guess we could call it. And then you kind of get a weird Rocky 5, which we'll get to in a week's time. But
we'll get to that.
Yeah, as far as the music goes, pumping it was great. I couldn't tell you my favorite song from it though. That's what's really strange because actually no, I can't. I'm lying. Sorry, it's the Apollo Creed entrance. It's
Living in America. Hell yeah, that's
easily.
Isn't that just like the best entrance to a ring you've ever seen, wrestling or boxing? Like it's just, and it's so America as well. That's one of my favorite moments. I was going to save that for my favorite scene, but I love James Brown. So just seeing James Brown do what he does best is just great. It's so overblown, it's so American and OTT, and it's just, if you want to show that contrast between Ivan Drago and like Russia as a whole, they're very sort of like stoic people in this film, that's how they're portrayed. It's just the visible confusion on Ivan Drago's face as he's sort of like being sort of like sent up into the ring on this elevator, and all this mad shit is happening around him. And then obviously Apollo coming down on the mechanical bull just cements it. It's brilliant. That's easily one of my favorite scenes. I love that one. Do you have a favorite montage in the film? Because we were talking about this, like we knew there were a lot of montages in this film, but watching it again, they just don't stop. There's like maybe a handful of scenes, like actual scenes, like conversations between people in this film, and then it's just music video, montage. There's a scene where there's a training montage. There's the main one where he runs up to the top of the mountain, you know, Drago, like the main one that everyone knows. We get a really, really short Adrian scene in between. Yeah. And then it's right back onto Hearts on Fire and another training montage. I'm not complaining. It's great, but there's a lot. Do you have a favorite one? Because I'm struggling to pick
I think
one.
mine has to be the training montage, but it's when it's dropping between Rocky and Drago, the gyms. It's
So
that,
the
and
first
it's really boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that really boring. Here's modern technology versus old school in the terrain, and I love those kind of things. And like, it's really funny looking like, even like if you look at gym equipment today, and like what you see when you go to the gym, even that is less up to standard than whatever devices they were trying to create to put Drago on. That's what amazed me most. I was expecting some really dated things, but it is like an experiment thing with him. Like, it looks like he's in this he's in a Russian lab, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
It's that stereotype that we'd say he looked like he'd been in some weird Russian lab. He literally is.
Well, I actually read about that beforehand, and it was saying that the kit they used specifically for those scenes was being developed at the time, but that kind of stuff wasn't released for like almost decades after that point, which is mad. Yeah, like just the stuff they were working on. So that must have been like state of the art. It must have looked sci-fi at the time. Like, what is this weird sort of like stairmaster ladder thing that he's on? What is this treadmill that almost goes vertical? Like, yeah, it's mad. I thought it was all constructed for the film as well, like weird kind of technical stuff, but apparently not. Apparently, that was made for the film in secret, probably in a secret Russian lab somewhere, and then the general public in gyms didn't get it for decades after. So it's mad.
What happened is that Stallone probably bought the company and just shared it to the Expendables cast.
Is it the same company that made the robot in the film as well?
He's just there, like, he's just all these like technological advancements, and he's just sat there like on this mountain of them. It's like, oh, you want to be in the Expendables films? Like, here's your limited edition, like Sylvester Stallone store gym equipment. It's like, this is the stuff from Rocky IV. Like, yep, no one else has got it. But yeah, I love that montage. It's just anytime you see Drago, but it's such an easy option to pick that one. I really didn't like the flashback one, and this is what's weird. Whenever we've spoken about these films, quite often politely put, some of my favorite scenes have been the opening scene when they show the ending of the previous film. Not a criticism, that's a compliment every time. Didn't really get it with this one, but then it's like, oh look, here's like the Rocky greatest hits, and I was like, we're not that far into the Rocky films to need, like, I know Fast and Furious did it with Paul Walker, but that's different circumstances.
And that was
the seventh one. I know it was just this insane like montage. Like, it did make me think though, and this is maybe a conversation we'll have next week, and probably again actually with Rocky Balboa. This felt like the perfect retirement film for Rocky. I'm glad it isn't, is my main thought on that, because of what they were able to do with not Rocky V, but the three after. So if it was that ending of the character type thing, he ended the Cold War, he's going out on a high. A montage like that would have worked within the film, but it just didn't get me the car one. I don't know why. I really don't know why, but I'm being too critical.
They clock in the runtime, and it's like, right,
it's definitely that, yeah.
In the can, 80 minutes or 85 minutes. It's like, shit, can we get it to like 90 minutes, bang on the dot, add a 5-minute driving montage in with clips from the previous movies, go. I love the song, though, and I love it. I mean, if you hate the driving montage, you're going to hate Cobra Kai. That's all I'm saying. Like, the first episode of Cobra Kai, you're going to absolutely hate it, because there's one in
that's
that
different,
too.
Though. That's like time period gap, though, isn't it? Like, that's a bit...
I guess so.
If Creed 1 opened up with a Rocky montage of him driving and having all the memories, that would have probably hit quite hard.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like Rocky... If you were there in 1985, it's like, oh, remember Rocky 3? Yeah, we've already just had the opening scene, and now we're getting it in a montage 20 minutes later.
And they show loads of clips of the previous Apollo Creed and Drago fight as well. And it's like, that happened maybe 5 minutes ago, if that. Like, I'm aware, I remember that. I love it. I love the song. It's all a part of it for me. So not going to complain about that at all. Elizabeth agrees with me. I love the car scene in that song. Yeah, I don't know. What else are we talking? I guess favorite scenes. Jesus, just the whole film. Christ,
yeah.
We haven't talked about. I'm trying to think.
The whole film feels like one big scene, and I don't mean that as an insult. It's every scene blends. It's so quick. It's when do they fight? Do they give a date? I know they fight on Christmas Day at the end.
Christmas Day.
But do they?
I didn't remember that, so I was like, technically, could I watch this at Christmas? You've got your Die Hards, you've got all these films. I'm like, Rocky IV, Christmas Day.
Because I didn't know if it was. I was like, oh, are they fighting at Thanksgiving or something like that? Weird for the first fight with Creed, but it's just an exhibition, and that's one of my favorite ones. Is it's just an exhibition match, but favorite scene. It's hard to pick a favorite scene because they're consistent's the best word, right? Consistent's the best word because they're all great. Let's just answer the question. From the robot through to the promotion scene of Carl Weathers, through to the entrance, through to the fight, the aftermath, Didn't like the funeral scene, but that's a bit different. That's because it's not the rest. Adrian getting stalked by the press, thinking, I wonder why there's like 300 people outside my house when my husband doesn't want to have a fight. To then the training montage, to montage, another fight, fighting montage, fight. I can't pick a favorite. It's like picking the Revenge of the Sith favorite scene, isn't it? There's too many, because if you're gonna say the Drago and a Creed fight, then you're gonna have to say that means I'm not picking the entrance, I'm not picking the ending. To pick one means you're disregarding some others. And I just can't do it for this film. It deserves better.
There is one scene I can think of actually, and I have a little bit of a story of this when I went to I think it was Manchester Comic-Con, and Bridget Nielsen was there and Carl Weathers, and the scene in question is the one where you've got Adrian, Rocky, Paulie, and Apollo at the dining table, and Apollo's getting ready for the fight, and Adrian's concerned and everything. And they just interrupt the conversation. Mid-conversation, the robot just comes strolling in with Kenny Loggins, Gladys Knight, Double or Nothing. Great song, completely out of nowhere. And Apollo Creed just turns around, and I was making sure I was watching, because I asked the question when I was there at the Comic-Con. I said, so that robot scene, what was it like to be on set with a robot in the Rocky movie? Was it like a weird experience? And he went on this weird tangent, and he says, come to think of it, I don't actually remember ever being on set with a robot in Rocky 4. And I was like, okay, I'm going to watch out for it this next time. And there's no wide shot with all of them in with the robot. So
really?
Was that an insert? Did they film the scene normal at the table conversation? And then Stallone must have just gone like, can you just like turn over your shoulder and just say, what the hell is that? Or something just completely out of just random, like a random insert. And then we'll put the robot and the stuff with Paulie in afterwards. It did make me think if they did that, but it just comes in. You get the, she loves me scene, and then it just leaves. And then Apollo just looks really confused, like, anyway, so as I was saying, and then the conversation just continues on as normal. It's so random, but because of the randomness, it's one of my favorite scenes. Any other moments? I'm trying to think. The whole film's just great. The Russian premiere stuff at the end always gets a laugh out of me as well, like the slowly rising up and the applause. Just the whole film. Like, there's so many like one-liners and little pieces all the way throughout the film. It's just brilliant. I actually can't think of any more. I think we've probably talked about the majority of them in all honesty during this review, but that's one that sticks out for me as one of my favorites.
One thing I had to laugh at as well, when you get to the final fight, so this is more like the sad history stuff. So the USSR president at the time was called like Gorbachev or something like that. That was his name. The guy who's standing that starts clapping, they basically just went for anyone that looks like him.
Oh, really?
The only thing just didn't. In real life, he has this big birth. Well, he had a big birthmark on the top of his forehead, but like that is the only thing that's not there. They have a carbon copy of the guy to come in for this film, and I just thought it's just amazing. I could imagine. I should have done my research actually. I would have loved to have seen like the reception of Rocky 4 in 1985 in Russia. Probably banned, but it probably is still banned today. But I would have just been so intrigued to have seen. It's that like I just completely forgot. I was like, wait, Rocky's going to do a speech. This isn't very Rocky-esque, and it's just like, what is this like? Let two people fight, not 20 million, and it's that like standing. Is that
and you can change. Everybody can change, and then everyone applauds. I mean, even down to the poster, right? Like this film, the message at the end of the film, I guess, is meant to be like spreading unity, and we shouldn't be countries divided. We should, be friends and everything like that. And then you see the poster, and there is nothing more. I mean, the poster is the background of this stream right now. You cannot get more American than the poster to this thing. It is USA, USA, front and center. Rocky is victorious. Screw Russia. Even the boxing gloves at the start that collide.
Yeah.
If you freeze frame it, the Russian. I mean,
you've got the flags.
It spoils the end of the film. The Russian glove explodes on impact of the American one. You have to pause it. You have to go frame by frame, but it's just kind of a bit of hypocrisy going on there, which I thought was quite funny. Apparently, there were quite a lot of egos on set as well. I forgot to mention this during the fight. Carl Weathers does seem pretty precious anyway on set. Like I know he had some set twos with Stallone in previous ones. And I actually think they may have used the shot in the actual fight, because I remember him doing this. When he's fighting Drago in the exhibition match, Drago just picks him up and launches him into the corner. Now, I can't remember if he does that with Creed or if he does that with Rocky in the final fight, but I know someone gets picked up and like bodily thrown.
I think they both do at some point. I think they both do. Rocky does at one point and then spine busts him. I was like, oh my god, it's getting to WWE. But no, I think he does it to each of them. Underlips could have destroyed Drago.
Yeah.
Who would have known?
He could have been the main villain in this one. Get hit, you know, he takes up boxing. He's a new villain for the next Rocky film. But apparently, that wasn't like scripted or like rehearsed or anything like that. So Dolph Lundgren literally just picked up Carl Weathers and just, I mean, the strength on the guy to do that alone, to throw Carl Weathers. But Carl Weathers was not happy about that at all. He stormed off set, and I think they had to stop filming for 4 days. And in the final match between Lundgren and Rocky, most of it does look staged, but apparently the first few rounds they were legitimately sparring. Lundgren landed a punch on Stallone's sternum, and his heart smacked against his breastplate, which made his heart enlarge, and they had to stop filming for that. So he goes through some wear and tear with these films. But it just made me laugh about Carl Weathers. I was like, of course, Carl Weathers is kicking off at someone on set. Like, what's new? I think definitely a lot of egos on set with this, with Stallone and Lundgren. I don't know about Lundgren. Maybe he has some ego as well. I mean,
it was his second film, so I had a quick look then. So he had a cameo in View to a Kill, which came out the same year, that Bond film. Maybe we'll discuss that in April. But you got to think, he's this unknown. At this point in time, the one thing people forget, which I think everyone knows, he's very well educated. And we know that in the Expendables, they sort of take the piss out of him for that. But just off stereotypes, you would not think that like he is a very well educated individual, Dolph Lundgren, that he's been to all these universities. I think he's got a PhD, I think I've heard.
Yeah, no, he has, like physics or something, I think, hasn't he? Or chemistry or something like that.
Come on set as this specimen. And you've got Apollo Creed in his fourth Rocky film, Carl Weathers, who we know, as you said, is precious. He would not have liked the fact that some kid just threw him. That's a brute as well. And like we love Carl Weathers, but I know you mentioned that Comic-Con story. We both know behind the scenes there's been a lot of stories about Carl Weathers at conventions. Prices is probably actually a better word than conventions. But it just adds to it, doesn't it? Like there's the little bit in Rocky 2 where there's a bit of a scrap on that as well. And then you've got bits of it in here, and I think it just adds to it because it's nice to know that sort of 30 years later they all do get along. Granted, we didn't get Carl Weathers in the Expendables films, which is actually really sad looking back at all these. They all got along, and I think, we can't speak for them, but when this film came out, they probably sat down and watched it for the first time and thought, you know what, maybe we'll fly out for a couple of days, maybe I don't like him, but hell, that makes for good boxing on TV. You don't get that in real life. But I guess that's the point of it. That's how insane it is.
I think it kind of spoiled real life boxing for me, this film. This and Rocky 3. Like, I see the fights in this, I'm like, why can't it be like that? And then you realise that this is a film that's
it's like playing the games.
Yeah.
Like during the old Fight Night games. And it would be like, you can have your imaginary Mike Tyson versus Muhammad Ali. And it's like, yeah, not going to happen. And it basically is that. And to the point, those games basically rock up in Rocky Balboa, which was talking about.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, we'll be coming back to that in 2 weeks' time for Balboa. Really quickly, Henrik mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger trained Dolph Lundgren for the movie. I didn't know that, but I mean, judging from what Dolph Lundgren looks like, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And just one of Daniel's favorite scenes as well. Apollo and Rocky watching their old match as they discuss over retiring. Without some war, the warrior may as well be dead. Yeah, no, that's a great scene. And maybe we'll get more scenes like that in the director's cut. I think it's probably a good segue actually to talk about the director's cut. So me and you speculate that maybe it started as a Stallone lockdown project. Passing time. He's got Rocky 4 loaded up on his computer, digital editing. Let's go back into Rocky 4 and edit the hell out of this. So we're getting a director's cut at some point to coincide with the 35th anniversary. I believe it was released in America in November, so he's only got like maybe a week away before he's got to hit that deadline. But I know in the UK, we didn't get Rocky 4 for some reason till January the 24th, so in 1986. So ours will be in January, so we still got like a month or two to get it done. I don't know how I feel about this as an alternate cut. I mean, next year is going to be the year of alternate cuts, isn't it? I mean, the Snyder cut, that's a whole different story. But just out of curiosity, I will go and see it, whether it's coming out of the cinema or digital streaming, just as a comparative piece to see if you can make this film into something dramatic, maybe more in line with the previous Rocky films that came before it. But I'm kind of defensive I'm very protective over Rocky 4 and films that I love. And the biggest cut that's already been taken out of the film, the robot's gone. As far as we know, the robot's completely out of the movie. and it's all these elements like the music, the editing, the robot, the completely cartoony nature of it is what Rocky 4 is to me. And I think if you go in and start taking pieces of it out like that, it's going to cease to be what makes it great in the first place. So I'm cautiously optimistic for it. I'm more curious than anything about it. So, and it'll be nice to go and see it at the cinema if it does come out on the big screen, I guess.
Yeah, I think the lockdown project is the main thing. I think Coppola's just dropped the or done a trailer for the Godfather 3 one. He's a lot of time in his hands too, and it's weird because we mentioned the anniversary, and this has been floating around since what, like July, August, and like we're now at the end of November, and we had a release somewhere, but it feels very rushed. They want 35th anniversary isn't a big anniversary. Granted, it's another 5 years have gone past, but you've kind of the big ones are always sort of 20. It's basically the 10s, let's be honest. And it just felt so sudden. And then it all went quiet. And when did it go quiet? When Stallone's filming his new film. Now that's wrapped. Things are going to maybe heat up on this again. But I want to watch it at cinema, but I don't because I've not seen Rocky 4 at cinema. I don't want my cinema experience of Rocky 4 being a cut I've got no idea about. Could be incredible. It could not be incredible. But getting rid of the robot, that's already probably 5 minutes of the film gone, right? And it's might be a shorter runtime. It could be longer. So I'm going to hold fire. It just feels strange. I'm glad I'm not going to say I'm glad they did Rocky 4. I'm glad he's not touched Rocky 1 is probably the best way I could leave it at. I'm glad he's not touching up the Creed films or some of the earlier ones. And honestly, I'm not massive on... I'm going to sit here and say Lord of the Rings Extended is different. That's extended, and that is extended because the book, but also... that was made at the time.
Yeah.
They knew they wanted to release that and they couldn't release that. That's what I get annoyed at with these cuts that come out a lot. And I'm not keen on these new cuts that come out years after. I mean, we're going to talk Justice League next year. The whole cast spent 3 years saying we saw the Snyder Cut. They announced the Snyder Cut and now they've got to refilm loads of it. Mm-hmm. It's tricky with these cuts because they should be able to enhance your experience watching the film. Now, all honesty aside, I've not seen Godfather 3. I've seen 1 and 2 multiple times, and I've always kept away from Godfather 3. So I can't sit there and say, does it need a third? Does it need a redo to be better? Because I know it is that rep. It's not as good as the other two, but how many films are going to be as good as Godfather 1 and 2 in
I mean,
the real
if
world?
they can completely find a way to get rid of Sofia Coppola out of the third film, then maybe we'll talk that we might have a film comparable to the first two. I don't know. To be honest, I've only seen the Godfather films once a piece. I did watch 3, and it is the weakest one of the 3, but I didn't think it was as bad as everyone was saying. But compared to 1 and 2, it's absolutely night and day. But maybe I'm going to have to watch the Godfather films at a later date.
Do you see what I mean? It's tricky because Rocky 4 doesn't need anything changed about it.
And the thing is,
perfect the way
it could be great, and we could have 2 good versions of Rocky 4, but nothing's going to take away from this original cut of 4. And I think that even if it is great, I think this is the version that I'll always keep going back to, regardless of how amazing or dramatic the new one is, because this is what Rocky 4 is to me. I think if anyone needs one, it's Rocky 5. And I think there is a really low res version out there where someone's taken deleted scenes and B-roll and compiled what would be the original vision, the director's cut of Rocky 5. But that will be next week where we'll be covering Rocky 5, and we've certainly got a lot to say on that. So we've ridden the highest highs of Rocky 4, and next week we'll be discussing Rocky 5. And although it might be the weakest Rocky film, we'll still have a lot to talk about it. So finally, Elizabeth said, I cried at the end of this film, thinking it was going to be the last Rocky film. Little did we know. I think every Rocky film that's come out after the first Rocky film has always been, this is going to be the last. This is going to be the last. And maybe this one was going to be the last, but it made a hell of a lot of money. So we got Rocky 5, and the rest is history. So I think I've said everything I can on Rocky 4. If you haven't, everyone in the comments has seen this film, but if anyone hasn't, would thoroughly recommend. It's a completely different animal, and I could get why, if you're die-hard Rocky 1, Rocky 2 fan, you like that dramatic side more. I could understand perhaps why people wouldn't like this one, especially if they're newcomers to the franchise and they really gravitate towards that more dramatic stuff. But to be honest, I can't think of anyone, even as a Rocky fan that I know, that doesn't like Rocky 4. I'm trying to think now. I think every conversation I've had with a Rocky fan, they love the entire franchise for what it is. from the dramatic stuff to the cartoony stuff. And I think if a series can do that, I think that stands testament to the loyalty of the fan base as well. It's great, and it's nice that a franchise can do both of those halves. So absolutely, I'd recommend Rocky 4. I don't know if you have any final thoughts on it.
Rocky 4, it's the one we've been waiting for. There's nothing more you can add to the equation that this is that extreme build-up of what we've seen of the other films. And looking at it as a whole, as how we've done these reviews, sort of one each week, it's just incredible to see how far this franchise develops, and we've kind of reached that tipping point now. So, if you're not invested in Rocky, if you've never seen a Rocky film, you could probably get away with watching Rocky 4 because it's the least character-driven. You want to know who these people are, but they do enough to explain it. But, we are here 35 years later, and I just think this is it's so much fun. There's a smile on my face, loading the disc in, seeing the main menu photos, watching it again. You just can't. I would honestly, and Fast and Furious ones, I get why people might dislike them and how extreme they do go. If you can watch this film and you don't smile in the coming to living in America scene, if you have just nothing, it is, and that's just that one individual scene. If you can watch this film with no emotion, then I want to find that one individual, because this is celebrated for all the right reasons, and this one is a celebration. You think of the Rocky saga, you think of Rocky 4. It is that obvious, and it is just so much fun to go back to and visit. And it's always going to be fun to go back to and visit in the future when we're watching it again. There'll be a lot less of a gap for next time. And I guess obviously we have the advantage of being in the future. We also know what this film impacted, and this film led to the 2 Creed films, which, going back to 2015, who would have thought we would get an Oscar-nominated Stallone in this decade playing Rocky again? Imagine telling us that in 2006. Imagine Rocky Balboa comes out in 2006. So in 10 years' time, Stallone just got nominated for playing Rocky again. And you'd be like, what?
Yeah.
So that's how I'm going to leave this. This one is more the celebration of Rocky, of how extreme it's willing to go and what it wanted to do. And the main thing is, going back to the ending point, Stallone's heart's in the right place. I think that's a nice way of putting it. He's not making this with the animosity of being a propaganda piece. He's making it because he wanted to make a display. And fair play to him for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Daniel's last comment here, he's talking about some Rocky 5 stuff beforehand. I'm going to save that for next week, Daniel, because otherwise this is just, we're going to get into Rocky 5 territory. We're saving that for next week. I love all the Rocky movies, but I rank Rocky 4 last. I enjoy Rocky 5 a bit more because of more drama story, back to its roots, but action-wise, Rocky 4 is perfect. Yeah, I think that sums it up completely. And it's ideally what you gravitate more towards and what you want from a Rocky film. And I like having both options of cartoony and drama. So that'll do it for our review on Rocky 4. Thank you to everyone who's been commenting tonight. This has been great. We love doing these. The retro reviews are an absolute blast. And it's nice to get a conversation going and you guys sharing your experiences and your memories of the film as well. So be sure to give this video a like, comment, and share and subscribe as usual. It does help with the algorithms and getting the videos out there so that more people can see it. And that's the idea. That's what we want to do. We want to bring more people in, get more of a discussion going. But big thank you to everyone tonight for taking the time out of your night to watch our review. We will be back next week with our retro review for Rocky 5. But if you're not bored of us and you want to see more of us this week, we will be back on Friday for our weekly review series of The Mandalorian Season 2. And if you've been following The Mandalorian at home, you know this is the big one. This is where we're going to get a lot of recurring characters. It's very special as well because we are actually having our first collaboration on The Mandalorian reviews. George can probably tell you more about that because you've worked with them before. I know that.
Yeah, so we have Matt and Sean coming on from the Blue Banther Milk podcast. They are both Australians. Sorry, it's always the go-to. So it's going to be 10 p.m. here, 9 a.m. there. So they're jumping on. There'll be the 4 of us discussing episode 5, completely spoiler-filled discussion piece as well. We're really looking forward to it because they know their Star Wars stuff. We know our Star Wars stuff. None of us know what's going to happen this Friday. In our heads, we've all got things that are going to happen this Friday. So I think it's going to be a really lively discussion, which we're looking forwards to. And it's going to be great. As much as we love talking Mandalorian between ourselves, it's going to be great to get sort of a new duo come on and chat with us. So we're looking forward to that. And again, social media-wise, we're going to start teasing it from sort of tomorrow, Thursday onwards. Best way to find that out is on Facebook, Cinema Savvy, and Twitter at cinema_savvy. As I said, Mandalorian this Friday, but the main thing is Rocky. Well, it's not really the main thing, is it? Rocky 5 is next Tuesday. I'm going to be honest now. Final thoughts from me. I am actually excited to rewatch it because I've only ever seen it once. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic for next week. So I'll leave that as my farewell. Leave that there. It'll be my second time watching Rocky 5.
Yeah, it'll be interesting then, because are we going to maybe this will be the first one we differ on then when you rewatch it. It's been a while since I've watched it, so it'll be good to go back to it. But once again, big thank you to everyone tonight. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all staying safe during these crazy times, and we'll see you on Friday for Mandalorian or next week for Rocky 5.